No species could remember the exact moment humanity became dangerous, until the stars themselves seemed to bear witness. Historians from 1,000 civilizations would argue over the date for centuries, replaying archive transmissions and reconstructing timelines down to the last nanosecond. Some claimed it began with a single unanswered distress signal drifting through interstellar space. Others believed it was the silence that followed, a silence so complete it felt unnatural, as though the galaxy itself had stopped breathing. But every survivor agreed on one truth. There had been a day when something fundamental changed. A line, invisible to every empire but humanity, had finally been crossed. And once that line disappeared behind them, there was no force in existence capable of restoring what had been lost. For generations, humanity had earned a reputation unlike any other among the stars. They were the diplomats who arrived carrying medical supplies before soldiers. They rebuilt shattered colonies that did not belong to them. They shared scientific breakthroughs with rivals who had once threatened their extinction. When border disputes erupted between ancient empires, it was often a human delegation that crossed the battlefield under white banners, risking their own lives to prevent another war. Their patience became legendary. Their willingness to forgive became almost mythical. Alien leaders praised human compassion in public while quietly mocking it behind sealed council doors. To them, kindness was simply another weakness waiting to be exploited. The insults had never truly stopped. Human ambassadors were laughed out of assemblies. Trade convoys vanished in disputed systems, their cargo seized under fabricated legal claims. Entire colonies endured economic blockades designed to starve them into submission without firing a single shot. Every time, Earth responded with restraint. Every attack was documented. Every casualty was mourned. Every violation was answered with another proposal for peace. Across the Galactic Dominion, military strategists reached the same dangerous conclusion. Humanity would never retaliate. Humanity would always choose diplomacy. Humanity would always blink first. That assumption spread faster than any fleet. Pirate kingdoms targeted human shipping lanes because they expected negotiations instead of resistance. Expansionist empires carved away frontier systems one treaty at a time, confident Earth would sign another compromise rather than ignite another conflict. News channels across civilized space joked that humans possessed limitless patience, turning their greatest virtue into a galaxy-wide punchline. Even neutral worlds began believing the myth that humanity lacked the will to fight. They saw smiling diplomats and hospital ships. They never looked beneath the surface, where grief quietly accumulated like pressure beneath the crust of a restless planet. Then came the day the galaxy could not explain. Without warning, every human embassy closed its doors. Every diplomatic frequency fell silent. Merchant fleets altered course simultaneously. Exploration vessels vanished into classified jump corridors. Across thousands of systems, human representatives simply stopped speaking. No declarations. No threats. No desperate appeals for mercy. Only silence. Cold, deliberate, and absolute. It spread from one end of explored space to the other like an approaching storm. Alien governments dismissed it as political theater. Admirals laughed and ordered their fleets forward. Politicians congratulated themselves on finally forcing humanity into submission. None of them understood what that silence truly meant. Because patience does not disappear in an instant. It breaks. Quietly. Completely. And when humanity's patience finally shattered, the sound was not an explosion or the firing of a weapon. It was the absence of every peaceful voice the galaxy had spent centuries ignoring. In that terrible stillness, as stars burned above worlds that had forgotten gratitude and mistaken mercy for fear, something ancient awakened within the human spirit, not hatred, not vengeance, but an unshakable resolve. And before another sunrise touched the worlds of the Galactic Dominion, every species would learn the lesson that echoed through history forever: the most terrifying civilization is never the one eager for war, but the one that has run out of reasons to avoid it. By the late 26th century, humanity had become something the galaxy had never expected, not an empire built on conquest, but a civilization whose greatest achievements were measured by the worlds it had saved rather than the wars it had won. Earth no longer stood alone beneath its familiar blue sky. Thousands of human settlements glittered across the Orion frontier, the Perseus Reach, and the distant Spiral Arms, connected by shimmering quantum gateways that folded impossible distances into moments. Massive orbital habitats circled thriving planets like luminous halos, their glass and alloy structures reflecting nearby suns in rivers of silver light. Towering space elevators stretched from planetary surfaces into orbit, carrying millions of travelers every day. Artificial ecosystems bloomed inside colossal rotating cylinders where forests, rivers, and entire mountain ranges existed beneath transparent domes overlooking endless stars. Wherever humanity settled, life followed. Dead worlds breathed again. Empty skies filled with hope. Among those countless stars sailed the exploration cruiser Resolute, one of Earth's most celebrated long-range vessels. Unlike the intimidating dreadnoughts fielded by rival powers, the Resolute carried laboratories instead of heavy weapon batteries, botanical gardens instead of missile silos, and diplomatic halls instead of interrogation chambers. Her polished titanium hull bore the emblem of the United Earth Coalition, a simple blue sphere embraced by a ring of stars. To those who served aboard her, it represented a promise more than a government: wherever humans traveled, they would leave a place better than they had found it. Standing on the panoramic command deck, Captain Elena Hayes watched another newborn star system emerge from the blue shimmer of quantum transit. Vast clouds of emerald and violet nebulae drifted across the darkness like celestial oceans, while young planets circled a brilliant white star still surrounded by glowing rings of cosmic dust. The bridge fell into reverent silence. Even after 25 years among the stars, moments like these never lost their power. Every unexplored system carried the possibility of first contact, forgotten history, or discoveries capable of changing countless lives. Elena rested one hand against the transparent alloy viewport, her reflection merging with the sea of distant galaxies beyond. She had commanded rescue missions into collapsing wormholes, negotiated peace between species that had spent centuries at war, and delivered emergency supplies to colonies abandoned by their own governments. She had witnessed extraordinary acts of courage from humans and aliens alike. Yet experience had taught her one lesson above all others: the unknown deserved respect before fear. Every decision she made carried the weight of that belief. Behind her, the bridge hummed with quiet precision. Engineers monitored quantum reactor output while navigation officers projected holographic star charts that rotated above their stations like glowing constellations. Linguists prepared universal translation matrices in case intelligent life awaited them. Xenobiologists eagerly debated atmospheric readings as drones launched toward nearby planets, scanning oceans, continents, and hidden mineral deposits. There was excitement in every voice, not because humanity sought territory, but because each new discovery offered another opportunity to build friendships where none had existed before. Far beyond the bridge, families lived ordinary lives aboard the Resolute. Children attended classrooms overlooking the stars. Botanists cultivated earth forests beside alien flowering trees whose glowing leaves illuminated peaceful gardens. Musicians practiced melodies inspired by dozens of civilizations, filling residential corridors with echoes of cultures united by curiosity instead of fear. The ship itself felt less like a military vessel and more like a traveling city dedicated to exploration, learning, and hope. But hope had become increasingly rare across the wider galaxy. Encrypted reports arrived almost daily from distant sectors. Trade disputes escalated into military occupations. Entire civilizations fortified their borders against neighbors they no longer trusted. Powerful empires expanded relentlessly, claiming they brought order while leaving conquered systems stripped of their resources. Human relief convoys often arrived before local governments, feeding starving populations regardless of political allegiance. Many worlds welcomed them as heroes. Others viewed their compassion with suspicion, believing no civilization could possibly be so generous without hiding a greater ambition. Captain Hayes understood that dangerous misunderstanding better than anyone. As the Resolute continued deeper into unexplored space, its engines whispered through the darkness with effortless grace. Behind the beauty of newborn stars and untouched worlds, she felt an unease she could neither explain nor ignore. The galaxy glittered with breathtaking wonder, yet beneath its brilliance something colder was beginning to spread, an invisible current of hostility that diplomacy alone might not be able to calm. Humanity had spent generations proving that peace was stronger than domination. Soon, someone would decide to test that belief. The first attacks did not arrive with thunderous declarations of war or fleets blotting out the stars. They came quietly, almost politely, hidden beneath official notices, disputed border claims, and carefully crafted diplomatic language. A human cargo convoy carrying medicine to a famine-stricken colony vanished inside the Helios corridor. Hours later, only scattered wreckage drifted through the vacuum, frozen against the light of a distant sun. Emergency beacons repeated the same fractured distress call before dissolving into static. On Earth, families gathered around silent communication terminals, waiting for messages that would never arrive. There was no victory announcement from the attackers. No admission of responsibility. Only an empty stretch of space where hundreds of lives had disappeared. Then the pattern spread. Colonies along the frontier reported strange sensor ghosts moments before orbital defenses mysteriously failed. Research stations dedicated to peaceful scientific exploration went dark without warning, their quantum relays severed with impossible precision. Supply ships carrying food, water purification systems, and medical equipment were intercepted by Dominion patrols enforcing newly invented territorial restrictions. Entire populations found themselves trapped behind expanding military blockades, watching relief vessels hover helplessly beyond weapons range. Hunger became another weapon. Fear became another language spoken across the stars. Aboard the Resolute, Captain Elena Hayes stood motionless before the holographic operations table as red warning markers multiplied across the galaxy. Every pulse of crimson represented another colony under siege, another humanitarian mission interrupted, another desperate request for assistance. The room remained unnaturally quiet except for the soft hum of processors struggling to keep pace with incoming transmissions. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, their training urging them toward action while their orders demanded restraint. Elena's hands remained clasped behind her back, though every instinct screamed to move. Another distress signal, Captain, the communications officer whispered. The words seemed heavier each time they were spoken. A holographic recording flickered to life above the command table. Smoke drifted through the streets of a once thriving settlement. Emergency sirens echoed between shattered habitation towers. Children huddled beneath collapsed shelters while volunteer medics searched burning debris for survivors. In the background, sleek Dominion cruisers floated silently in low orbit, watching without firing another shot. They no longer needed to. Terror had already accomplished what their weapons could not. The recording ended. No one on the bridge spoke. Across human space, grief spread faster than information. Memorial walls filled with photographs before investigations could even begin. Entire schools paused lessons to observe moments of silence for students whose parents had never returned from convoy duty. Rescue crews recovered escape pods carrying survivors too traumatized to speak, their eyes fixed on invisible horrors replaying endlessly in memory. Every new tragedy chipped away at humanity's belief that reason alone could preserve peace. Yet Earth still refused to answer violence with violence. Emergency councils met around the clock. Ambassadors crossed hostile territory carrying fresh ceasefire proposals despite repeated threats against their lives. Human diplomats presented overwhelming evidence before the Galactic Assembly, sensor recordings, survivor testimonies, intercepted military orders, orbital surveillance proving systematic aggression. Their voices remained calm. Their requests remained simple. Stop the attacks. Allow humanitarian access. Honor the treaties. The response was colder than the silence that followed. Dominion representatives dismissed every accusation as fabrication. Independent investigations were blocked through procedural delays. Some delegates openly mocked humanity's appeals, arguing that a civilization unwilling to defend itself had no place shaping galactic law. Laughter echoed through chambers where justice was supposed to live. The recordings reached every human world. Captain Hayes watched those broadcasts alone in her quarters aboard the Resolute. She stared at the smiling faces of politicians denying the suffering she had witnessed with her own eyes. For a long moment, she closed the display and looked through the observation window into the endless sea of stars. Somewhere beyond that beautiful darkness, innocent people were still waiting for help. Humanity had not forgotten them. Every destroyed convoy was documented. Every broken treaty was archived. Every lost life was given a name instead of a statistic. The Dominion celebrated each unanswered attack as proof that humanity lacked the courage to fight. They mistook discipline for fear, compassion for weakness, and patience for surrender. They never realized they were not watching a civilization accept defeat. They were watching it remember every reason it would one day refuse to kneel. As the Dominion's invasion fleets assembled beyond the outer reaches of the Sol system, humanity revealed a truth it had guarded for centuries. It was not a secret born from fear or ambition, but from restraint. Beneath the crushing weight of Antarctica's ancient ice sheet, far below research stations, beneath forgotten tectonic vaults and layers of rock untouched by civilization, rested a structure no modern nation had built. Its existence had been erased from every public archive, known only to a handful of leaders who inherited the knowledge generation after generation. They called it the Vault of Silence. It had never appeared on a map because it was never meant to be found. Not by enemies. Not even by humanity itself, unless the day came when every peaceful path had finally failed. The story began centuries before humanity ever reached the stars. During the earliest days of deep planetary scanning, scientists investigating strange gravitational fluctuations beneath Antarctica uncovered a geometric anomaly impossible to explain through natural geology. The formation extended for hundreds of kilometers beneath the ice, constructed from an unknown alloy older than Earth's oldest mountains. Buried chambers contained symbols that matched no human language, yet sophisticated quantum algorithms eventually deciphered fragments of their meaning. They were not instructions for conquest. They were warnings. They spoke of a civilization so ancient that every known galactic empire was young by comparison, a species that had vanished millions of years before humanity evolved, leaving behind one final safeguard. A defense system powerful enough to preserve life against extinction, or erase civilizations that threatened it. Humanity had made a choice that day. The system would remain asleep. World leaders signed what became known as the Silent Accord, an agreement passed secretly from one generation to the next. No matter how advanced humanity became, no matter how dangerous the galaxy grew, the vault would never be activated unless every diplomatic option had been exhausted beyond question. Entire governments rose and fell while that promise endured. Wars were prevented. Colonies were rebuilt. Peace treaties were honored. Every generation added another signature beneath the accord, believing that true strength was measured not by possessing ultimate power, but by refusing to use it. Now, that promise stood on the edge of collapse. Deep beneath the Antarctic ice, automated systems that had slept for millions of years detected a sequence they had been waiting to receive. Across Earth, encrypted authorization codes flowed simultaneously from every member of the United Earth Council. Military commanders. Civilian representatives. Scientific directors. Colonial governors. Every surviving voice entrusted with humanity's future entered the same command. There were no objections left to raise. No diplomatic channels still open. No unanswered appeals worth sending. The final condition written into the Silent Accord had been fulfilled. Inside the endless darkness below, the vault awakened. At first, it was almost imperceptible. Dust that had rested undisturbed for geological ages drifted upward as dormant machinery vibrated with silent life. Gigantic rings of black metallic architecture began rotating around a sphere suspended without visible support. Ancient conduits ignited one after another, flooding impossible corridors with streams of pale blue energy that shimmered like liquid starlight. Symbols carved into colossal walls glowed for the first time since before recorded galactic history. Somewhere within the heart of the structure, an intelligence older than countless civilizations opened invisible eyes. Across the galaxy, observatories recorded an event no astrophysicist could explain. Pulsars skipped their rhythm by microscopic fractions of a second. Quantum communication networks experienced synchronized interference. Navigation beacons flickered simultaneously across thousands of light-years. It lasted only moments, but every advanced sensor array detected it. Something unimaginably powerful had awakened. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Elena Hayes watched impossible readings spread across her holographic displays. Gravitational waves radiated outward from Earth in perfectly symmetrical patterns unlike any natural phenomenon ever documented. Veteran officers stared in stunned silence. Even the ship's predictive artificial intelligence returned a single response across every tactical screen. Unknown source. Unknown technology, ***. Elena felt the weight of history settle over her shoulders. She had spent her life believing humanity's greatest weapon was compassion. She still believed it. But compassion had limits, and someone had finally forced humanity to reach them. Far beyond Earth's orbit, Dominion commanders continued advancing, convinced victory was only hours away. None of them understood that they were no longer marching toward a defenseless world. They were approaching a promise humanity had prayed it would never have to keep. The Dominion Armada entered the Sol system with absolute confidence. Thousands of warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their dark hulls stretching across the void like a moving eclipse. Supercarriers deployed waves of strike craft that shimmered against the light of the sun, while colossal siege platforms aligned themselves toward Earth with mechanical precision. Dominion admirals watched tactical displays fill with projected victory scenarios. Their analysts predicted humanity's remaining defenses would collapse within hours. They expected frantic surrender broadcasts, desperate evacuation attempts, and one final appeal for peace. Instead, every communication channel remained silent. Earth neither threatened nor pleaded. It simply waited. Captain Elena Hayes stood aboard the Resolute at the edge of Earth's defensive perimeter, her eyes fixed on the impossible calm hanging over the battlefield. Around her, human vessels held formation without firing a single shot. Medical frigates, exploration cruisers, defense destroyers, and orbital stations floated together beneath the blue glow of Earth, united by a discipline forged over generations. Every officer on the bridge understood what this silence meant. They had reached the final page of diplomacy. Whatever happened next would be remembered long after every star in this system had burned away. Then space itself changed. Without warning, the darkness between the Dominion fleet and Earth began to ripple as though the vacuum had become an invisible ocean. Stars behind the invading armada bent into impossible arcs. Time seemed to hesitate. Instruments aboard every ship screamed conflicting warnings before shutting themselves down entirely. The ancient defense network beneath Antarctica had extended far beyond the planet, weaving a gravitational lattice across the solar system that no modern civilization could comprehend. Massive rings of pale blue energy materialized in the emptiness, rotating silently around nothing visible. They were beautiful, and terrifying. The first Dominion battleship fired. Its primary particle cannon discharged with enough force to split moons. The beam never reached Earth. Halfway across the battlefield, the brilliant stream of energy simply curved away, folding into itself before vanishing without a sound. Confused officers fired missile volleys, antimatter lances, and quantum torpedoes. Every weapon suffered the same fate. Some dissolved into harmless light. Others reversed course before safely disintegrating. The defense network did not retaliate with destruction. It simply refused to allow violence to exist within its reach. Panic spread through the invading fleet. Navigation systems failed as localized gravity shifted unpredictably. Entire cruisers found themselves drifting helplessly despite engines operating at full power. Supercarriers that had dominated dozens of campaigns rotated uncontrollably, trapped inside invisible gravitational currents they could neither detect nor escape. No explosions echoed across the battlefield. No burning wreckage filled the void. Instead, the Dominion witnessed something far more unsettling. They had become completely powerless. At that moment, hundreds of human ships emerged from quantum space behind the immobilized armada. They arrived in disciplined silence, forming defensive lines instead of attack formations. Their weapons remained powered down. Their shields glowed softly beneath the light of the distant sun. At the center of the formation, the Resolute advanced alone. Captain Elena Hayes stepped toward the bridge transmitter. Every military frequency. Every civilian relay. Every emergency beacon across known space automatically synchronized to her signal. Her voice carried no anger. Only certainty. For centuries, she began, humanity answered hatred with patience. We rebuilt worlds we did not own. We healed those who called us weak. We honored treaties others shattered without remorse. We buried our dead without demanding yours. The battlefield remained frozen. Millions listened. You believed mercy meant fear. She paused, watching countless Dominion vessels drift helplessly before Earth. You were wrong. We activated this defense not to conquer you, but to stop you. If humanity had desired revenge, none of you would still be alive to hear this message. Silence answered her words. Not because the galaxy lacked a response, but because every civilization finally understood how close it had come to witnessing its own extinction. One after another, Dominion admirals powered down their remaining systems. Weapons were deactivated. Fleet command codes transmitted unconditional surrender across every channel. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries lowered their banners before a civilization that had won without hatred. As the first rays of sunlight broke across Earth's horizon, Captain Hayes quietly exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Humanity had proven its greatest strength was never the ability to destroy. It was the unwavering courage to endure every injustice until there was no honorable choice left but to stand, and when that moment finally arrived, the entire galaxy discovered that the patience of humanity had never been a weakness. It had been everyone's final warning. The war ended not with triumphant celebrations or fleets firing victory salutes, but with a silence unlike any the galaxy had ever known. For the first time in countless generations, hyperspace corridors carried relief ships instead of invasion fleets. Orbital shipyards that had once forged weapons of conquest now assembled medical stations, atmospheric processors, and reconstruction platforms. Across thousands of liberated worlds, shattered cities slowly emerged from the shadows of war. Smoke no longer rose from ruined skylines. Instead, construction drones floated through the dawn, rebuilding homes stone by stone beneath skies that had forgotten the sound of bombardment. The galaxy had survived the day humanity's patience finally broke, but no civilization escaped unchanged. In the years that followed, historians struggled to describe what had truly happened. Some insisted humanity had won because of the ancient defense network hidden beneath Antarctica. Others argued that the victory belonged to Captain Elena Hayes and the courage of those who stood their ground without surrendering to hatred. But the oldest scholars reached a different conclusion. The machines beneath Earth had never been humanity's greatest weapon. They were merely the last shield. Humanity's true strength had been forged long before the Vault awakened, in every rescue mission flown into hostile territory, every treaty honored despite betrayal, every hand extended to enemies who had offered nothing in return. The final battle had not created that strength. It had simply revealed it. Across the rebuilt Galactic Assembly, delegates from civilizations once divided by fear gathered beneath a new chamber carved from crystal mined on a world that had nearly been destroyed during the conflict. There were no towering thrones reserved for powerful empires anymore. Every species, whether ancient or newly spacefaring, sat in equal circles around a single central platform. Above them floated a memorial unlike any monument in recorded history, a slowly rotating hologram of Earth, surrounded by millions of tiny lights representing every life lost before peace was restored. Beneath it, written in hundreds of languages, glowed a single inscription. Never mistake kindness for inability. Visitors often stood before those words in complete silence. Children from worlds that had once feared humans asked their teachers why such a simple sentence carried so much weight. Veterans lowered their eyes when they answered. They remembered the broadcasts. They remembered the silence before Earth's response. They remembered how close the galaxy had come to destroying itself simply because it had confused compassion with weakness. Those memories became lessons repeated across generations, not to inspire fear of humanity, but respect for every civilization that chose peace while still possessing the strength to defend it. Captain Elena Hayes never considered herself a hero. Years after the war, she retired quietly to Earth, refusing statues, medals, and political office. On clear evenings, she often climbed a grassy hill overlooking the ocean where the stars reflected softly across calm water. The scars of war still lived within her, carried in memories she could never fully leave behind. She remembered the faces of those who had never returned, the desperate voices in forgotten distress calls, the unbearable weight of giving the order that awakened the vault of silence. Yet she also remembered something else, the moment surrender replaced destruction, when an entire galaxy chose to stop fighting because humanity had proven there was still another way. As twilight faded into night, Elena looked upward. The same stars that had once watched civilizations burn now shone peacefully over worlds rebuilding together. Trade routes had reopened. Former enemies exchanged scientists instead of soldiers. Children born after the war grew up believing cooperation was normal, scarcely imagining how fragile that peace had once been. The ancient defense network beneath Antarctica returned to dormancy, its impossible power sleeping once again beneath miles of silent ice, waiting for a day humanity prayed would never come. The galaxy would remember countless battles, legendary admirals, and fallen empires. But above every victory, every treaty, and every monument, one truth endured across the endless sea of stars. Humanity had never sought to rule the galaxy. It had only asked to live beside it in peace. And when that peace was finally pushed beyond its breaking point, the universe learned a lesson written not in fire, but in unwavering resolve. The most powerful civilization is not the one that wins every war, but the one that exhausts every chance for peace before taking its final stand.